your host for this evening. Please welcome our panelists, Dr. Melita Walker, the principal of West Middle School and co-founder of the Bold Academy, Crystal Graves Yazaja, local business owner and co-founder of the Bold Academy, Nikki Magruder, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for MU Healthcare, and Dr. Erica Neville, Principal of Douglas High School. So ladies, thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful opportunity. Of course, it is absolutely my pleasure. So ladies, our seat at the table. Everyone is familiar with this term, right? Our seat at the table. And what does that mean? So I looked it up because I wanted to know what the meaning is according to Google and the world abroad. And so the seat is often reserved for those who are considered to have both influence and power to make decisions, affect change. And the table is a symbol of power, negotiations, and credibility, through which one can forward a career, generate a sale, or plot a course for success. So ladies, you tell me, when you hear about a seat at the table, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Who wants to kick us off?
I'll jump.
Jump.
Access and connection. The ability to have the right people know who you are at the right time, and to be able to have those connections necessary to facilitate those informal conversations, discussions, and deals, for lack of a better word, to help propel you to your next spot and place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would everybody kind of agree with that great summation?
Perfect.
For sure.
Okay, so when we talk about our seat at the table, we are a panel of strong, smart, beautiful, successful Black women, right? And people will say, things are going great, right? I mean, look at the caliber of women on this panel. I mean, PhDs, business owners, directors, you know, we run schools, but we know that there are still many hurdles to overcome as Black women in the workplace, the community, the boardroom, and sometimes even in families. So what do you see as some of those challenges?
Well, I'll start here. I think that one of the challenges is the lack of diversity. And as a Black woman who is in a school that is, the staff is predominantly Caucasian, one of the challenges is overcoming sometimes stereotypes, not just with staff, but with parents as well. It is living up or down to expectations that others have set for me based on the color of my skin. It's the challenges of, are you really welcome in the room? Is the seat at the table really for you? Because when I think of a seat at the table, I think of the opportunity and ability to have your voice included. And even sometimes when I'm sitting at the table, my voice is not included. And many times while I am seated at that table, I'm the only one who looks like me. And with that comes a great deal of challenges in itself.
That's interesting. You know, one of the things I read when I was doing research for this panel was not to confuse having a seat with having a voice.
A voice.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
Because sometimes people invite you to the table for the appearance that you are welcome and a part, but only so that they don't appear to exclude someone. So you might be at the table, but they don't want to really hear your opinion or what you have to say.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I've also thought about possibly people who have a seat at the table, and when they get to the table, they realize that it's not always easy to speak up, especially when it's something that's driving change, or something where you might be sharing an unpopular point of view. Have any of you ever been in a situation where, I'm at the table and I know that this is something that needs to be said? How do you determine? Do you say it? Do you hold it back?
Well, I feel like I'm in a unique position because people expect me to say something that's going to make them uncomfortable, being that that's the work that I do. And I tell people all the time, it's not comfortable for me either, especially when I am the only one in the room sometimes. But there's a difference. I think a lot of the focus tends to be on, we want to welcome diversity. We want to welcome and give you a seat at the table, but it's really, we want you to be here as long as you think like we do, act like we do, say the things that we do. So the focus is more on assimilation. So is the seat truly a seat? Or maybe it is just that, and just sit there, but don't do anything else.
Yeah. I've heard twice, I think Melita and Nikki, you both alluded to, and I know it will come up a million times in this conversation about being the only one in the room, the only one at the table. So that leads us really right into another question about the loneliness of onlyness. What has been your experience as a Black woman with that, the loneliness of onlyness?
There is a level of communication that has been acceptable themselves up to. They expect people to talk a certain way, to communicate a certain way, to give this, that they want comfort at this table, if you will. So there's this whole conversation about what's the informal and formal ways of communication that continue to keep the room safe, or really standardized or homogenized, if you will, that is always that only thing. So it's wonderful. I love, because working in Columbia, Missouri with 100,000 people, for better or for worse, I get to sit across and with the table with some of these ladies that are sitting on this panel. And it's delightful because there's a whole nother level of baggage that I don't have to explain while I'm sitting there having that communication about a topic that is very passionate to both of us in the same way, or all three of us, or all four of us in the same way, or all five in some spaces. That just, it just, okay, it's like we don't have to have that explanation. We can just get started.
Yeah.
I know we had a conversation as a staff last month around an issue of equity. And one of the presenters made a comment about white people being vulnerable enough to ask questions that might be considered offensive or questionable to people of color. And they discussed creating a safe place for white people to be able to ask questions. And I challenged them that I, as a Black woman, also need that safe space, and that it is not okay that certain statements are made out of ignorance or out of curiosity or out of whatever. And so often, that safe space is not considered for me as an only, and I am not considered, and that is definitely an issue.
When we are, in these rooms, in these spaces, how easy or hard is it to bring your authentic self? And what does that mean, bringing your authentic self to the table?
Well, I will say, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I will say that, when we talk about code switching, and I know that it's really controversial, but I understand that in different settings and with different groups, I can be more of my authentic self than others. And in professional environments, my speech changes, my body language changes, a lot of things changes. A lot of things change based on the norms of the setting. I find that when I am in certain settings, in their work settings, I adjust my language so that other people in the room find me more credible. And that is problematic. But I have found, and I say to the staff that I work with and students that I speak the language of currency, because when I don't, I'm not taken seriously the way that I need to be taken in the leadership role that I'm in.
Mhm. I love that, the language of currency.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation amongst ourselves before about code switching and where it stems from. Do we need to do it and all of that? And I'm still processing. And I say that from a professional that has trained on code switching and teaching young leaders, if you will, how to navigate, to Dr. Walker's point, the different environments and knowing our audience. But I've also had the experience where, this is where I get troubled because I've been told that I don't talk Black. And so I get challenged by that because, in my opinion, I'm able to use this language of currency, knowing my audience and knowing what fits where, and I can slip into it in a second, depending on where I need to navigate. But I didn't know that there was a race assigned to professionalism. So that's where I get challenged, because then we can go into the conversation of who determines what's professional.
Professional.
So it's a very interesting topic, for sure, but a necessary one. I know how to navigate. That's why I can jokingly say I'm multilingual. Even if English is my only language, because of the ability to switch it up as needed.
I love that.
Say too that sorry, Crystal.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the older I get, the more comfortable I am in my skin, and the more comfortable I am being my authentic self. There was a time when I did not wear braids as a professional. Now I wear my hair naturally and I wear braids all the time. There are certain traditions and cultural things that I celebrate and that I'm out about in a way that I wasn't when I was younger. And so for me, the older I get, I feel more confident to be my more authentic self.
I did a lot of the hoop jumping in my younger years. And educationally, if that's the hoop, I've usually jumped through it enough times to be able to say and talk and do and act the way I choose to. In a position of leadership, there are always assumptions based off of gender. In a position of leadership, there's assumptions based off of race. First of all, it shocks people. Sitting in my office, and I share my office, I have some reasons for that, with my assistant principal. And I'll never forget, one of our city officials came through and I introduced myself, and my counterpart happens to be a Caucasian male. And he introduced himself first. Hi, my name is, and I'm the assistant principal. Said it very clear in English. The man came into the office and said, "You must be the assistant principal." And I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm the principal." And I pretty much Miles Davis him after that. That was that conversation, because it was, she's it, yeah, I'm it. So the language, my hair, I made a decision 17 years ago to go natural and have been in some version of it ever since. my ability to walk and to establish my presence in a room, what leadership ought to say, do, and act. I'm me, especially after I hit 50. After I'm 50, I can only do this. This is all I am. And then it extended when I became an entrepreneur, because now I get to set the tone so that others feel comfortable in their own skin and don't have to pretend, don't have to code switch, you just bring you and your professionalism, your expertise to the table as you've got it. Once again, the seat at the table, or do you want to build the table? And when you build it, you get to set the rules again. So
Erica, don't jump too far ahead. Don't jump. Don't jump in front of my.
Okay,
neck.
I'll stop. But those are the things that I've kind of evolved to as time has gone on. You just get
And go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
No, you just get this. That's it. I don't flip and flop, and that's it.
And I think, into Erica's point, for me, I've always been able to show up however I want to show up because of what I do as an entrepreneur. So when people say, when they bring me, this is me every day, all day, whether you see me at work or you see me sitting at a meeting at Ready or on a board, like, I have the luxury, I would really say, as an entrepreneur, that I don't have to be anyone else. And if I do, then it's actually more unexpected, if that makes sense. So as an entrepreneur, I've been lucky enough to have that luxury, to be my authentic self all the time.
I love this conversation, and can relate and feel and agree with every single thing that you guys are saying. I want to flip a little bit and talk about something that is discussed a lot as we talk about diversity, as we talk about inclusion, as we celebrate diversity. Let's talk about allyship. A few of us were on a panel together not too long ago. And there was a question about allyship, and I know that the chat at that moment kind of started to blow up. I know I got some questions and some comments afterwards. And so I want to talk about what allyship is, and how we know that, allyship, it can be difficult to be an ally to people who don't reflect your own experiences, right? So allyship is not passive, right? It's active. So how can allies help make the table more inviting?
First, they have to be identified as allies. And so I think that is part of the challenge for many, because no one should wake up and just self-proclaim, I'm an ally, when you haven't done any work before that day to position yourself as such. So are you engaging with those that are not like you? Are you learning what is important and what the challenges are? And are you using your voice? When you see something, are you saying something? Are you being positioning yourself to help them elevate, or to it's easier, let me say this, it's easier to say that we are an ally than it is to actually be one. Because if when you're put in a position where that person needs you to be an ally, if you don't step up, then you've lost all of your credibility.
Allyship is action.
Active. Yes. Action, for sure.
And it might require some sacrifice.
It might.
Yeah.
And so you can't be an ally and keep all of your privilege simultaneously. And I think that's where a lot of people, they talk about, when you proclaim yourself to be an ally, your actions will show it, and you're willing to give a piece of it, and you won't have to proclaim it. People will know it.
I would say it will require. So it might, but I would say it will, because it's going to require you to come out of your comfort, right? So you can't sit and be comfortable in your silence and call yourself an ally. It doesn't work that way.
I find this conversation so interesting, especially with the equity work that the district has embarked on. And I find allyship such a challenge because I find in my walk, on my walk, that I have very few white colleagues who truly understand my walk and who truly understand what I need, this level of support that I need. And so often I find that I am the one who's speaking out about the injustices of Black and brown people. And as a Black person, when I speak out about it, it's not heard the same way.
Yeah.
And I have a dear friend, Jacob Cerna. He is the principal over at Rockbridge. I love him. And when we were both at Battle High School and we were working as assistant principals, we did quite a bit of equity work. And we would create presentations and find resources and materials to share with the staff. And often I would put a lot of the presentation together, but I recognized that I could not be the one to say, to challenge, to share
Yes.
the information, because I think that there were a lot of people who could sympathize with the experiences of Black and brown people that we talked about when we talk about the disparities in education and all of those things, but they couldn't really empathize with me. But if it came from Jacob, it was better received,
Yeah.
it was more accepted, and there were fewer challenges to what we were presenting. And so I think he was an ally. He was my ally. He supported me and
Sure.
to address so many of the inequities that we were trying to address as a school system. But the issue is that we don't have enough of our white peers who are willing to first of all, you gotta want, right? You gotta want
So,
change, you gotta want to support. And I find that whether it's intimidation, whether it's lack of confidence, whether it's lack of knowledge, I don't find that there are too many where I am who are stepping out to be an ally.
mhm. Can I just clarify a statement too, just piggybacking on that? So I said you can't just wake up and say, I'm an ally, and because it's a lifelong process, but you can wake up and say, I'm positioning myself for allyship, and from this day forward, you are doing that active and intentional work. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged by thinking, well, I've missed the boat, because
Right.
there are some, and I know we've had this conversation, the year of 2020 was just horrendous. But in the summer, there were several people that were new to the conversation around race relations in particular. And I would want them to know that from that day forward, whenever their realization, their aha was, you can begin the work that day. So if you're hearing that for the first time today and you want to be an ally, start to do the active and intentional work today.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And okay, so when you start that work, and I'm gonna get out of here, but when you start that work, right? Because people are going to wonder. There are going to be some people who will say, I want to start the work. I want to know. I want to do it. Is it cool to call Melita, Crystal, Erica, Nikki, Adonica? Because that's your Black friend. I'm just gonna keep it real. Is that okay? Or is it not okay? Because these are going to be real questions. People are going to wonder.
I think it probably depends on
it
the
depends.
level of friendship and the level of connection that you have with a person.
Yes.
I know that when George Floyd was senselessly murdered, that was so traumatic. And I had, some of my white friends who checked in with me to see
Mhm.
how I was doing. And I found that to be just fascinating because I can't recall a time when that ever happened before. And there have been so many
Yes.
Blacks and brown people murdered by police and other people. But I found that in when they called to check on me, um, I didn't want to do the work for them. Like I didn't want to answer certain questions and field, you know, their curiosity. And I get it. It was so clear that my trauma was different from what they were experiencing.
Mhm.
And I call it my trauma and their experience because it really is different. And so I wasn't in the place where I could be that answer. It's just too painful.
Mhm.
But as an educator, I recommended books and, Twitter, like, certain authors are really doing some great work. But sometimes I resented even that because you can Google just like I Google. And, the only way to really learn is to do the work. And I don't want to have to do your work. It's too hard.
And to be able for them to articulate it through their lens and their experience. You can see where the crossing over happens with allyship when they are able to talk about it in terms of their own privilege and to openly see this did not hit me the same way it hit you, because those were not, and I think it really got highlighted yesterday as even I watched newscasters have to, yesterday was the day that the siege was on the Capitol, that I watched the newscasters have to walk through that conversation of this wasn't a protest. This was an insurgency. This was an attack on the very fabric of democracy, but they had to walk through the language. There was no problem in walking through the language last summer to be able to call a riot or to move to that. So people have to walk through their phases themselves and to own that story. They've got to do that work. Allyship takes work. Checking on me is nice. And you've got to go back and do your individual work to say, well, wait a minute. Where's my place in this story and how did we really get here? Without working with the assumption that it just happened because there were no strategic, no institutional, no historical, no economic, no political factors that led to where we got to. And that changes the connectedness with that allyship when people are actually started doing the work and started studying and understanding that this is not happenstance that Black and brown people got to where they are today and that white people got to where they are today. This was orchestrated and it is supported. That there's laws, there's political, there's economic, there are structures that have been put in place historically to get us to our point. So it changes the conversation in the story once that happens.
And I think the other piece too is recognizing that the plight of the Black man and the brown man and woman, like Dr. Neville was saying, is absolutely intentional. And the histories that we learn about in school is a whitewashed history. And there are so many historical records that can explain the why. When you talk about housing and segregation and school systems, when you talk about redlining practices, when you talk about loans and all of those things, it's research. It's in the history, but it's not in that history book that white man down in Texas wrote. And so part of doing the work is reading books like Caste, reading books like Stamped from the beginning, reading books about the history, Ta-Nehisi Coates, like Black authors who have done the work for you. And you have to step into that. And you have to do the work. You got to read. You have to have a better understanding. So often when I express a feeling or a knowing that I have been mistreated, I've been treated unjustly, and I know it's because of the color of my skin, and I say something about an injustice, the most devastating thing is for a white person to say, nah, or discount my experience. And yesterday, what happened at the Capitol revealed what we have been saying for hundreds of years. There are two justice systems, one for Blacks and one for whites. And the devastation behind watching that is just incredible. But it's something that we've known all of our lives.
Can I just say, Danica, I think that to your question of, is it okay to go to your Black friend, even if the relationship is one where you're extremely close, there should be a responsibility on your part. You should feel the responsibility to not put that emotional labor on them, and to do your own research. But then if the relationship is one where you can go and say, hey, I'm reading this book, I would love to discuss that with you if whenever you're ready. Is that okay? I have questions about this or that, but prove that you're intentional about doing the work and not putting that emotional labor on your friend. Because even though I tell people all the time, I'll be a part of your village, because I intentionally position myself to do this work. And so, yes, I am a resource, but I am still a Black woman. So I go through the trauma, the trials, the tribulations. And even though I step out to do this work every day, sometimes I need to practice some self-care and pull back. And so recognizing when I have my friends that come and say, hey, I just want to check on you. So I agree. That's wonderful when they do. And please don't stop doing that. But I also appreciate the ones that say, like, I just saw this and I'm appalled. And I'm going to do this as a result of that. And I'm going to have this conversation with my family members. I'm going to have I'm going to talk to and stand up against this, that, or the other. That's where you need to be.
I think, Nikki, that last part is very important about when you recognize it and you want to bring it up and talk about it, understanding bringing it up and talking about it with action. Like, I know it. You don't have to come bring it to me and tell me, oh, can you believe? Oh, I can believe it because I live it every single day. Like, yes, I believe it, but saying like, I don't really want to talk about it because this is what I live. Yeah. You can go learn about it and then we can discuss it once you get to a point where you understand, or have a inkling of what I go through every day.
So there's really a critical re-education piece. I think that's the thread that keeps going through this. Have the history you think you know versus the history available to you through primary source documents, and the two may not be the same. They are not synonymous. So that's probably one of the precursors. Once people get on that journey, is that they need to start unpacking and say, well, maybe I need to do a re-education piece. And that's that hard work that that's where the books come in. That's where the internet and the searches. And it's a critical piece of that conversation because it gives depth to your understanding about what Crystal just said when she said, you want to tell me I live this every day. What you mean? I've been doing this for how many years of my life? This is it. Thank you. But it's that education piece. And we're at fault in part, but that's the whole point of public schools, to indoctrinate as opposed to necessarily educate and push to critical thought. Those are two separate thoughts.
As we wrap up, because I bet we could go on for another easily another 45 minutes for sure.
Sounds like a podcast to me.
You know what?
Yes.
You know what? Yes. This is all, of course, extremely thought-provoking. And what my hope is that it will provoke some thoughts, and that it will also get people to think, whoever said work was going to be easy? Whoever said work was easy? When you wake up every day and it's time to go to work, do you always feel like it? You don't. But if it's important to you, if it's providing some return on the investment, then you go to work, right? And so work is not easy, but it's necessary, correct? It is necessary. And I believe that we live in a place, in Columbia specifically, where we can get this work done. I believe we can get this work done. I do. But it takes not just the 5 of us, or, the other 5 of us, or the other 5 of us. It's going to take the entirety of this community in order to get us to a better place. And so thank you, ladies, for joining me for this. I appreciate and love each and every one of you sincerely. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon.
Okay.
I am not my head, I am not the skin, I am not your expectations, no.